Welcome back, everybody, to the Poker Model Hand Breakdown. Today I'm going to show you an example of a hand where we execute on the poker model strategies and things are going according to plan, and then there's an unexpected move on the river made by my opponent that is kind of random. We know it's a potential outcome that could occur, but the way that it's done and the timing that it's done forces us to move away from the hand. So let me get into it here. I have ace jack of hearts, 25,000 chips. The blinds are 250, 500, which means I have 50 big blinds, and I'm sitting on the button. We have a raise to 1,000 from under the gun, and the action folds all the way around to me. Now, ace jack, like we mentioned before, is a call behind hand. So as long as I have over 20 big blinds, which would be over 10,000 chips in this case, I'm able to make a call and see a flop, hopefully, where we can determine if our hand is good, bad, or mediocre. So because there's only one raise in front, because I have a call behind hand and I have over 20 big blinds, I call 1,000 chips, and the hand moves to the flop after folds from the small and big blinds. The flop comes king, jack 2 with 2 clubs, and now I have to qualify my hand. So I have second pair. King would be top pair, jack is second pair, and according to the poker model, second pair is a mediocre hand. With mediocre hands, we're not quite sure if we want to get all our chips in right now because we have the best hand. We definitely, don't think we have the worst hand at this point. We don't really know. So with mediocre hands, we want to see if we can get to the next card and to the river and turn our hand over at the end to determine if we're winning or losing. So what happens is my opponent decides to check. And again, I have a mediocre hand. So think about it this way. If I make a bet here and my opponent then raises me, well, I have to then fold because I'm not really sure where I'm at, and there's just this big pot now that's occurring that I'm kind of unsure about. If my opponent folds, that's fine, but I really didn't need to have a jack to get my opponent to fold because with bad hands, I can make that exact same play and get the fold. And if my opponent calls and I have just a jack, well, now the pot is building, and a lot of different things can happen that can confuse the hand and make it difficult. So really, for all these reasons, we're just going to control the hand. We're going to keep our position on the button, and I'm going to make a check. So I check behind, and the 4 of spades comes, and now my opponent is betting 1,500 into me. So here's where the poker model recommends using a turn blocker bet. A turn blocker bet is meant to slow down our opponent and see if we can get to the river cheaply for all the reasons we mentioned on the flop with our mediocre hand. So think about it this way. If I call 1,500 and then another card comes and there's a huge bet on the river, I'm just not quite sure where I'm at in the hand. If I see this 1,500 bet, I cannot fold because I have something. And I'm not sure. Maybe he's bluffing. Maybe it's a draw. So there's definitely a chance I still have the best hand. So I can't just fold to a 1,500 bet. So what I do is I make a turn blocker bet, and a turn blocker bet is a min raise on the turn that kind of puts the pressure back on my opponent. So I raise to 3,000, and now the action's back on him. If my opponent folds, I win the pot right now, which at this point in the hand is fine. There was another bet that we won. It was a decent sized pot. If my opponent calls, well, that's fine too now because there's only one card to come, and it's most likely going to force a check on the river, where I can then check behind and see if I truly have the best hand or not. And if my opponent raises me back here, well, then I got the information I needed to really learn that I probably don't have the best hand. And I'm getting away cheap because I figured out on the turn that that's the case, and most of the time it will be. Now, what happens next? So if there's a fold, then I win. Done. If there is a raise, then I fold. Hands over. If there's a call, then we're going to see a river card. Now, if my hand doesn't improve on the river, then and my opponent checks, then I'm going to check behind and flip my hand over. If my hand does improve on the river, and there's a check, then I'll probably make a bet, some sort of value bet, to try to win more money on the river. But if my opponent calls and then on the river he decides to just make a bet out to me, that's kind of a red flag. That is a similar bet to as if he had raised me back on the turn. And that's really just the mindset we have at the poker model in this spot. So I make my min raise. If he raises me back, I assume he has it. If he calls and then bets big on the river, I also assume he has it. So I know we covered a lot so far, and ask us questions if you haven't, but let's get to the river and see what happens next. So my opponent calls, and then on the river he makes a bet of 12,000, which is actually more than the size of the pot. So this is one of those scenarios where he didn't raise me back on the turn, but some interesting river card came, and now he wants to bet big. So when this bet comes, the poker model suggests just folding. It's another flag that makes you kind of know that he has the best hand. Of course, players are going to do anything with any two cards, but we knew on that turn min blocker bet that was the most amount of chips that we were going to lose on the hand, and we are not ever going to call this $12,000 bet on the river when the pot only had, 7,000 chips or so. What did he have? Well, a lot of players will make that bet on the turn with 2 spades, 2 clubs, 2 pair. The flop was not a high action flop, but then the turn kind of opened up some draws. And my guess here is that when that 8 of spades hits on the river, he filled up on some sort of flush or some sort of 2 pair. Will we ever know for sure? No. But one thing that I did know was that I was going to control my stack. As you can see, I still have 21,000 chips. We have a lot of poker left to play, and I don't need to make this hero call in the river. And I already knew that I would fold to this type of bet, which is really kind of what the poker model allows you to do when you're implementing it. So again, thanks for listening to us today. Any questions, concerns, anything at all, let us know. We'll answer them, for free. We like helping people, and we'll talk to you on the next one. As always, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Poker Model Hand Breakdown. For more training tools and Texas Hold'em advice, subscribe to our YouTube channel or pay us a visit at thepokermodel.com to see our weekly articles, bi-weekly podcasts, and other episodes of the Poker Model Hand Breakdown. Until next time.